The marble floor was cold beneath Ethan Brooks' worn sneakers when Miranda Cole's hand cracked across his face, a sound that echoed through the luxury resort lobby like a gunshot. In that frozen moment, surrounded by gasping guests and horrified staff, the operations manager stood triumphant, her manicured nails still trembling from the impact. She had no idea she'd just slapped the man who owned everything she thought she controlled. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we dive into how one act of arrogance destroyed careers and exposed the rot beneath polished marble, I want to invite you on this journey with me. This is a story about invisible people, quiet power, and the moment when respect stopped being negotiable. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this resonates with you, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 3 days before that slap, when a tired father walked through glass doors seeking nothing more than rest. The Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Seascape Resort, its waves catching afternoon sunlight like scattered diamonds. Ethan Brooks stood in the passenger pickup area, his single worn suitcase resting beside him, and allowed himself one long breath of salt air before stepping toward the entrance. He'd been awake since 4 that morning. 2 flights, 1 delayed connection, and a rental car shuttle that took 40 minutes longer than scheduled. His faded jeans and plain gray t-shirt carried the wrinkles of travel, and his canvas sneakers had seen better years. But his posture remained straight, his dark eyes alert despite the exhaustion pulling at his shoulders. This was supposed to be peace. 3 days alone before his son arrived. 3 days to decompress, to sleep in an actual bed, to remember what it felt like to breathe without a deadline crushing his chest. The resort's glass doors slid open with a whisper of expensive machinery. Inside, the lobby was exactly what the website promised. A cathedral of wealth dressed in cream marble, dove-gray furniture, and abstract sculptures that probably cost more than most people's cars. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. The air smelled of vanilla and something tropical Ethan couldn't quite place. Behind a gleaming desk that looked carved from a single piece of wood, 3 staff members stood in crisp navy uniforms. None of them looked up. Ethan walked across the lobby, his footsteps quiet against the polished stone. He approached the desk, offering the smile he'd perfected over years of dealing with people. Warm, professional, unthreatening. "Good afternoon," he said. The woman closest to him, mid-20s with perfectly straightened blonde hair, continued typing on her computer. Her name tag read, "Jessica, Guest Services." Ethan waited. 10 seconds passed, then 15. "Excuse me," he tried again, still polite. "I'd like to check in, please." Jessica's fingers paused on the keyboard. She glanced up, her gaze traveling from his face down to his suitcase and back up again. Something shifted in her expression, not quite disgust, but a careful neutrality that felt worse. "Name?" she asked, her tone flattening to pure transaction. "Brooks. Ethan Brooks. I have a reservation for—" "Just a moment." She turned to her screen, clicking through windows with deliberate slowness. "Brooks? Brooks? Yes, I see it here. Ocean View King, checking in today, checking out Saturday." "That's right." "Unfortunately, your room isn't ready yet." Jessica's eyes stayed locked on her monitor. "Housekeeping is running behind schedule. You'll need to wait." Ethan checked his watch. It was nearly 3 in the afternoon. The reservation confirmation said check-in was at 2. "That's the earliest possible check-in time, sir. It's not a guarantee. Policy." She delivered the word like a period at the end of a sentence. "I understand. How long should I expect to wait?" "Could be an hour, could be 3. Difficult to say." Jessica returned to her typing. Ethan studied her for a moment, noting the way her colleague, a young man with gelled hair and a name tag reading Marcus, deliberately avoided eye contact. The third staff member, an older woman whose tag identified her as Susan, senior associate, was helping an elderly couple near the concierge desk, her voice warm and engaged. "Is there somewhere I could store my bag while I wait?" Ethan asked. "Bell desk is outside, to your right as you exit. They handle luggage." "Thank you." Ethan stepped back from the counter, scanning the lobby for seating. A cluster of leather armchairs surrounded a low table near the windows. He was halfway there when the glass doors opened again. The man who entered wore a suit that Ethan recognized immediately. Tom Ford, probably around $4,000. Navy blue, perfectly tailored, with shoes so polished they caught the chandelier light. He was perhaps 50, silver-haired, carrying a leather briefcase that matched his Oxfords. The transformation at the front desk was instant and absolute. Jessica's posture straightened. Her smile appeared like stage lighting clicking on, bright, engaged, genuine. Marcus abandoned whatever he'd been pretending to do on his computer and stepped forward. "Good afternoon, sir." Jessica's voice lifted an entire octave. "Welcome to Seascape Resort. How may we assist you today?" The businessman approached with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been ignored in his life. "Checking in. Name's Patterson." "Of course, Mr. Patterson. Let me pull up your reservation right away." Jessica's fingers flew across her keyboard. All her earlier lethargy vanished. "I see you're booked in our presidential suite. Excellent choice, sir. Would you prefer ocean or garden views from your terrace?" "Ocean." "Perfect. Marcus, would you please prepare a welcome tray for Mr. Patterson? Champagne and our artisan chocolate selection." Right away. Marcus hurried toward a service door behind the desk. Ethan stood by the windows, suitcase still at his feet, watching the scene unfold with the quiet attention of someone who'd spent years observing human behavior. He wasn't angry yet, just noting details, cataloging the discrepancy. "Your room is ready right now, Mr. Patterson," Jessica continued, her enthusiasm bordering on theatrical. "I've taken the liberty of upgrading you to our premium ocean panorama suite, no additional charge. Brandon from our concierge team will personally escort you up and ensure everything meets your expectations." A young man in a different uniform, burgundy instead of navy, materialized from somewhere near the elevators. "Right this way, Mr. Patterson. May I take your briefcase?" "That won't be necessary." Patterson's tone was pleasant but dismissive, the voice of someone accustomed to service. "Thank you, though." "Of course, sir. The elevators are just here." As Patterson followed Brandon toward the elevators, Marcus returned with a silver tray bearing a champagne flute, a small ice bucket, and an arrangement of chocolates that looked like tiny sculptures. "Your welcome amenity, Mr. Patterson," Marcus said, presenting it with a slight bow. "Very kind." Patterson accepted the champagne, took a sip, and continued toward the elevators without breaking stride. The entire interaction took less than 3 minutes. When the elevator doors closed behind Patterson and his escort, the energy at the front desk deflated like air leaving a balloon. Jessica returned to her computer. Marcus disappeared into the back room. The warm efficiency evaporated, leaving only the cool marble and vanilla-scented air. Ethan walked back to the desk. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his voice even. "I'd like to understand something." Jessica looked up with thinly veiled irritation. "Yes?" "That gentleman who just checked in. His room was ready immediately. You mentioned mine could take up to 3 hours. Is there a reason for the difference?" "As I explained, sir, housekeeping schedules vary, and yet his room was ready. At the same time, mine supposedly isn't." Ethan placed his hands on the counter, not aggressive, just present. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for equal treatment, the same courtesy you just extended to him." Jessica's jaw tightened. "Sir, I don't appreciate your tone." "My tone is calm and respectful. I'm simply pointing out an inconsistency. Mr. Patterson is a platinum elite member of our rewards program. His benefits include priority check-in and I wasn't asking about champagne or upgrades," Ethan interrupted quietly. "I was asking why I'm being told to wait 3 hours when rooms are clearly available." Marcus reappeared behind the desk, sensing tension. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem," Ethan said. "Just a question about policy." Jessica's expression hardened into professional ice. "Sir, if you're unhappy with our check-in procedures, you're welcome to speak with management. In the meantime, you'll need to wait like everyone else who doesn't have elite status." "Where would I find management?" "The office is in the administrative wing, but I should warn you, they're very busy, and walk-ins aren't usually accommodated." "I'll take my chances. Suit yourself." Jessica returned to her screen with aggressive finality. Ethan picked up his suitcase and headed toward the hallway Jessica had indicated with a dismissive wave. The administrative wing turned out to be a long corridor behind the main lobby, lined with framed photographs of the resort in various stages of construction. Ethan paused at one image. A groundbreaking ceremony, a group of people with shovels, everyone smiling for the camera. His own face looked back at him from the photograph, younger by 5 years, standing beside the architect and the original investment partners. He didn't linger on the memory. The corridor ended at a glass door marked Operations Staff Only. Ethan knocked twice, then entered. The office beyond was functional rather than decorative. Gray carpet, fluorescent lighting, desks covered in paperwork and computer monitors. A woman in her mid-40s sat at the largest desk, phone pressed to her ear, her expression fixed in the particular annoyance of someone dealing with a supplier who'd failed to deliver on time. "I don't care what your warehouse system says," she said into the phone. "We're missing 2 cases of Chilean sea bass, and our executive chef is preparing for a private event tonight. You need to—" She noticed Ethan standing in the doorway and held up one finger, signaling him to wait. Her nameplate read Miranda Cole, Operations Manager. Ethan waited, studying the office. Schedules covered one wall. A large monitor displayed what looked like occupancy charts and revenue projections. Framed certificates hung behind Miranda's desk. Hospitality management degree, service excellence awards, professional development courses. "Fine," Miranda said into the phone. "But this is coming out of your invoice. We're not paying full price for partial delivery." She hung up without saying goodbye and swiveled her chair to face Ethan. "Can I help you?" "I hope so. I'm having an issue with check-in." Miranda's eyes performed the same inventory Jessica's had. Worn clothes, old suitcase, tired face. "You're a guest?" "I am. I have a reservation, but I'm being told my room won't be ready for potentially 3 hours. Meanwhile, I just watched another guest receive immediate accommodation and complimentary champagne. I'm trying to understand the reasoning." "Sir, I'm sure the front desk explained our policies. They explained that I need to wait. They didn't explain why other guests don't have the same requirement." Miranda's expression shifted from neutral to cool. "Different membership tiers receive different service levels. That's standard in the hospitality industry. I'm not questioning different service levels. I'm questioning whether basic respect should be tiered." "Excuse me?" "From the moment I walked into your lobby, I was invisible. No greeting, no acknowledgement. I had to ask twice just to be noticed. When I politely requested service, I was treated like an inconvenience. That same desk staff transformed entirely for a man in an expensive suit." Ethan kept his voice calm, factual. "I'm not angry about champagne. I'm asking why I'm not being treated like a human being." Miranda stood up, her posture straightening into defensive authority. "Sir, my staff are trained to provide excellent service to all our guests. If you perceive some slight, I'm sorry you feel that way, but sorry you feel that way isn't an apology. It's a dismissal." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't appreciate being lectured on customer service in my own office. And I don't appreciate being ignored in your lobby." Ethan set his suitcase down, freeing his hands but keeping them relaxed at his sides. "I came here for rest, not conflict. All I'm asking for is basic courtesy, the same courtesy you'd extend to anyone else walking through those doors." "You know what your problem is?" Miranda's voice dropped into something harder, sharper. "You walk in here dressed like you're going to Home Depot, expecting to be treated like royalty. This is a luxury resort. People who stay here have certain standards, certain expectations. And I don't meet them based on my clothes? Based on the fact that you're standing in my office complaining instead of simply waiting for your room like a normal guest." Miranda crossed her arms. "Honestly, people like you are exactly why we have policies. You want 5-star service on a 3-star budget, and when you don't get it, you throw a fit." Ethan went very still. "People like me." "Yes, people who think the world owes them something just because they managed to scrape together enough for a reservation." Miranda's confidence was building now, fed by what she clearly perceived as righteous irritation. "Do you have any idea how many entitled guests we deal with every week? How many people think that just because they booked a room online, they deserve the same treatment as members who've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars at this property? I'm not asking for the same treatment as anyone else. I'm asking not to be treated with contempt." "Oh, please. Contempt?" Because you had to wait? Because you didn't get a red carpet rolled out? Miranda laughed, a short bark of derision. This is the real world, sir. And in the real world, you get what you pay for. You want better service? Earn it, dress better, act like you belong. Or go stay at a Holiday Inn where nobody cares what you look like. The office went quiet, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of voices from the lobby. Ethan studied Miranda with the focused attention of someone committing every detail to memory. So that's your philosophy? Respect is something people have to earn based on their appearance and perceived net worth? That's reality, Miranda shot back. And if you don't like it, there's a Marriott 10 miles down the coast road. I see. Ethan picked up his suitcase. Thank you for clarifying your position. You're welcome. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. You can wait in the lobby like everyone else who isn't special. Ethan turned toward the door, then paused. One more question. Miranda sighed with exaggerated patience. What? If a guest assaulted another guest on your property, what would be the appropriate response? Excuse me? Assault. Physical violence. What's the protocol? Miranda's expression flickered with confusion before settling back into irritation. We'd call security and the police. Obviously. Why? Just curious about where you draw the line. Ethan opened the door. Seems like respect ends where you decide it does. I wondered if safety worked the same way. Are you threatening me? Not at all. Just trying to understand your standards. He stepped into the hallway. Thank you for your time, Ms. Cole. He walked back toward the lobby, his sneakers quiet against the carpet. Behind him, he heard Miranda mutter something to someone else in the office, probably a comment about difficult guests, delivered with the confidence of someone who believed she'd won an argument. The lobby had filled slightly in the time he'd been gone. A family with 3 children clustered near the concierge desk, planning activities. A couple in matching resort wear headed toward the pool terrace. The front desk remained pristine and efficient, Jessica and Marcus moving through their duties with practiced precision. Ethan found the leather armchairs by the windows and sat down, positioning his suitcase beside him. The ocean stretched beyond the glass, infinite and indifferent. Waves rolled in with metronomic consistency, each one erasing the last one's mark on the sand. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through messages. 3 from his assistant covering routine issues. 2 from his son's school about an upcoming field trip. 1 from his mother asking if he'd arrived safely. He typed back. Made it. Getting settled. Call you tomorrow. Then he opened his contacts and scrolled to a name he hadn't called in nearly 6 months. Richard Chen, Executive Director of Operations. The phone rang twice. Ethan? Richard's voice carried surprise and pleasure. Where are you? I thought you were off the grid for a few days. I am, or I'm supposed to be. I'm actually at Seascape. Our Seascape? The Atlantic property? That's the one. Excellent. How is everything? I know we've had some staffing transitions since your last visit, but the numbers look strong. Occupancy's been... Richard, I need you to pull up the staff roster for me. Front desk and operations management. A pause. Is there a problem? Let's call it an observation. Can you access personnel files remotely? Of course. Give me a second. Ethan heard keyboard clicks. Okay, what am I looking for? Operations Manager, Miranda Cole. Right, yes, Miranda. She came on about 8 months ago. Previous experience at a competing property in Charleston. Strong credentials, excellent references. She's been doing well, or at least the metrics suggest she has been. Why? What about front desk? Jessica and Marcus, I didn't catch their last names. More keyboard sounds. Jessica Winters and Marcus Chen. No relation to me. Both relatively new. Jessica's been here 5 months, Marcus about 7. Again, both performing adequately according to reviews. Ethan, what's going on? Ethan watched the front desk from across the lobby. Jessica was helping a well-dressed older woman, her smile bright and engaged. Marcus stood ready beside her, attentive and professional. What happens when operations philosophy contradicts our founding values? Ethan asked. Richard's voice became careful. Can you be more specific? We built these properties on the idea that hospitality means treating everyone with dignity. That service isn't about hierarchy, it's about humanity. Remember our first resort, the one in Oregon? You and I spent 6 months training staff on that exact principle. I remember. It's still in our mission statement. Is it still in our practice? Ethan, you're worrying me. Did something happen? Before Ethan could answer, the lobby doors opened and a man in his 60s entered, wearing jeans and a fishing vest, sunburned and smiling. He carried a tackle box and was talking animatedly to a woman beside him, presumably his wife, about the size of the catch he'd nearly landed. Jessica looked up from her computer as they approached. Her smile didn't appear. Her posture didn't shift. She waited for them to reach the desk before speaking, and even then, her greeting was perfunctory. Name? The fisherman, still riding the high of his day on the water, didn't seem to notice her tone. Henderson, we're checking out tomorrow, but I wanted to ask about extending one more night if possible. The fishing's been incredible. Let me check availability. Jessica's fingers moved across the keyboard with mechanical efficiency. We're fully booked tomorrow night. You'd need to check out as scheduled. Oh, that's too bad. Is there any chance? Sir, when a resort is fully booked, it's fully booked. There's nothing I can do about that. The fisherman's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. I understand. Just thought I'd ask. Will there be anything else? No, I guess not. Thank you anyway. Jessica was already looking past him to the next task before he'd finished speaking. Ethan pressed the phone back to his ear. Richard, I need you to do something for me. Name it. I need comprehensive reports on guest satisfaction scores for this property. Not the summary data. I want the actual comment cards, the detailed feedback, the complaints that didn't make it into the polished numbers. Can you have that sent to me by tonight? Tonight? Ethan, it's already past 5 on the East Coast. The analytics team, Richard. Ethan's voice didn't rise, but something in it shifted, the tone of someone who'd run out of patience for logistics. This isn't a request that can wait for normal business hours. I need those reports, all of them, by 9 p.m. Silence on the other end. Then, understood. Anything else? Yes. Don't contact anyone at this property about my presence here. No calls to Miranda, no heads up to management, nothing. As far as they know, I'm just another guest. Ethan, what exactly are you planning? I'm planning to see how we actually operate when nobody thinks the owner is watching. Ethan stood up, suitcase in hand. Send those reports to my encrypted email. And Richard? Thank you. Of course. But Ethan, be careful. Whatever you're seeing, whatever's happening, just remember we've worked hard to build these properties. Don't burn down what we've created over a bad day. I'm not interested in burning anything down. I'm interested in accountability. Ethan ended the call and walked back toward the front desk. Jessica saw him coming, and her expression cycled through resignation to annoyance. Your room still isn't ready, sir. I'd like to speak with someone from guest services about arranging activities while I wait. Activities? She said it like he'd asked for something unreasonable. Yes, I noticed the resort offers kayaking, paddleboarding, fishing charters. I thought I'd make use of the time. Jessica exchanged a glance with Marcus that Ethan couldn't quite interpret. The activities desk closes at 5. It's 4:30. They stop taking new bookings at 4:30 to process end-of-day paperwork. I see. Ethan kept his voice level. Is there someone else I could speak with? Perhaps the concierge? The concierge handles dinner reservations and local recommendations. For water sports, you'd need the activities coordinator. And that person is not available until tomorrow morning. Ethan smiled. Not warmly, but with the particular politeness of someone who'd stopped expecting anything resembling service. Thank you for your help. He returned to the armchairs and sat down again, pulling out his laptop this time. If he was going to wait, he might as well work. Email flooded his screen the moment he connected to the resort's Wi-Fi. Questions from department heads, approvals needed for renovation projects at 2 other properties, a contract review from legal. He worked methodically, responding to urgent items and flagging the rest for later. An hour passed, then another. The lobby transformed with the changing light, afternoon gold giving way to early evening amber. Guests flowed in and out, some fresh from the beach, others dressed for dinner. At 6 o'clock, Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from Richard. Report sent, Ethan. Some of what you're going to read isn't good. Ethan opened his encrypted email on the laptop and began reading. The first document was a standard satisfaction survey summary, overall scores for Seascape Resort across various categories. The numbers looked strong: 4.2 out of 5 for cleanliness, 4.3 for amenities, 4.1 for location. But tucked at the bottom, almost hidden in the formatting, was a category labeled Staff Courtesy and Respect, with a score of 3.4. Ethan clicked into the detailed comments. Front desk staff seemed bothered by our questions. Made us feel like an inconvenience. Service was exceptional for guests they deemed important. We felt invisible. Beautiful property, but the attitude of certain staff members made our stay uncomfortable. Felt judged from the moment we arrived. If you don't look like you belong, they treat you accordingly. The complaints went on for pages. Not every guest, plenty of reviews praised the staff, but enough to form a pattern. Enough to suggest that what Ethan had experienced wasn't an isolated incident, but a systemic issue. He clicked to the next document: internal complaint logs that guests had filed directly with management. One entry from 3 weeks ago. Guest reported feeling discriminated against based on appearance. Claimed front desk refused service until guest presented credit card showing high limit. Front desk manager investigated. Found no policy violation. Matter closed. Another from last month. Family complained that staff ignored them for 20 minutes while helping other guests. Operations reviewed security footage. Determined staff were busy with other tasks. No action taken. And another? Guest alleged operations manager made disparaging comments about their clothing and suggested they might be more comfortable at a different type of property. Guest requested partial refund. Request denied. Guest banned from future reservations for making false accusations. Ethan closed his laptop before he read any further. Across the lobby, Miranda Cole emerged from the administrative corridor carrying a tablet and wearing the focused expression of someone reviewing numbers. She walked to the front desk and leaned in to speak with Jessica, pointing at something on the screen. Jessica nodded, typed something, then both women laughed at some shared observation. Miranda glanced around the lobby with the proprietary assessment of someone surveying her domain. Her gaze passed over Ethan without recognition or interest, just another piece of furniture in the carefully curated space. Ethan's phone rang. His son's number. He answered immediately, his voice warming. "Hey, buddy." "Dad, did you make it to the beach?" His son's excitement came through the speaker, pure and uncomplicated. "I did. The ocean's right outside the window." "Is it blue like in the pictures?" "Even bluer. Wait until you see it tomorrow." "I can't wait. Grandma said she'd bring me in the morning. We're going to leave really early so we can have the whole day." "That sounds perfect. Are you having fun? Did you build any sandcastles yet?" Ethan looked around the pristine lobby, at the staff who'd spent 3 hours pretending he didn't exist, at the manager who'd told him to his face that he didn't belong. "Not yet, but I will when you get here." "Okay, I have to go. Grandma's calling me for dinner. Love you, Dad." "Love you too, buddy. See you tomorrow." The call ended, leaving Ethan alone with the ocean view and the weight of decisions not yet made. At 6:30, Jessica finally called across the lobby. "Mr. Brooks, your room is ready." Ethan gathered his laptop and suitcase and walked to the desk. Jessica handed him a key card without meeting his eyes. "Room 412, elevators are to your left. Checkout is at 11 a.m. on Saturday." "Thank you." "Will there be anything else?" "No, this is exactly what I expected." Something in his tone made her glance up, but Ethan was already walking toward the elevators. Room 412 was exactly what he'd paid for. A clean, well-appointed space with ocean views, a king bed with crisp white linens, and a bathroom stocked with expensive toiletries. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing exceptional either. Just a room. Ethan stood at the window, looking out at the darkening water. Tomorrow his son would arrive, full of excitement about the beach, about spending time together, about 3 days of uncomplicated joy. Ethan had promised him peace, safety, a place where they could both breathe. He thought about the reports Richard had sent, about the pattern of complaints stretching back months, about guests who'd been made to feel small, invisible, unworthy, all because they didn't match someone's mental image of what a luxury resort guest should look like. He thought about Miranda Cole's words. You get what you pay for. Earn it. Act like you belong. And he thought about the conversation he'd need to have with his son someday soon, about how the world sometimes judges you before you speak, about how dignity isn't something you should have to earn. His phone buzzed. Another message from Richard. I've been reading these reports. We need to talk about Seascape. Whatever you decide to do, I support you. Ethan typed back. Tomorrow. After my son arrives and is settled, then we'll talk about what needs to change. He ordered room service for dinner, a simple sandwich and soup that arrived delivered by a young server who smiled genuinely and asked if there was anything else he needed. Ethan tipped him well and thanked him by name. Then he sat on the balcony as night settled over the ocean, watching waves he couldn't see but could hear, their rhythm unchanged by anything happening inside the resort's walls. At some point, his exhaustion caught up with him. He moved inside, set an alarm for 6 a.m., and lay down on the bed still fully dressed. Tomorrow his son would arrive. Tomorrow they'd build sandcastles and swim in the ocean and eat ice cream until their stomachs hurt. Tomorrow would be uncomplicated joy. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of room 412, Ethan Brooks made a decision about what kind of father and what kind of man he wanted to be. Not just for his son, but for every person who'd ever walked into a place and been made to feel like they didn't belong. Tomorrow would be for his son, but the day after tomorrow would be for accountability. The ocean kept its rhythm outside the window, wave after wave, each one reshaping the shore in ways invisible until morning revealed what had changed. Morning came with pale light filtering through the curtains, the sound of waves a gentle insistence that pulled Ethan from dreams he wouldn't remember. He showered, dressed in clothes identical to yesterday's, jeans, a clean t-shirt, the same worn sneakers, and ordered coffee from room service. The young man who delivered it was different from last night's server, but equally genuine in his greeting. Beautiful morning for the beach, sir, he said, setting the tray on the small table by the window. Supposed to be clear skies all day. Perfect, Ethan said, handing him a $20 bill. My son's arriving this morning. First time seeing the ocean. The server's face brightened. That's amazing. He's going to love it. The tide's going out around 11, so the beach will be perfect for exploring. Lots of shells and tidal pools. Thank you for the tip. My pleasure, sir. Enjoy your day. After he left, Ethan stood on the balcony with his coffee, watching early morning joggers on the beach below. A maintenance worker raked the sand smooth, erasing yesterday's footprints. Further down the shore, someone was setting up a yoga session, arranging mats in a precise semicircle facing the sunrise. His phone rang at 7:30. His mother. We're about an hour out, she said, and he could hear his son chattering excitedly in the background. Someone's been awake since 5 asking when we could leave. Put him on. Dad! His son's voice exploded through the speaker. We saw 3 dolphins from the bridge. Grandma said they were swimming south for the winter, but I think they were racing because they were going really fast. That's incredible, buddy. Did you take pictures? Grandma did, but they're kind of blurry because we were driving. But I saw them, and they were huge. Ethan smiled, the first genuine one since he'd arrived. I can't wait to hear all about it. You're going to be here soon. Are we going straight to the beach? As soon as you get here, I'll meet you in the lobby. Okay. Grandma says I have to give the phone back now. Love you. Love you too. His mother's voice returned, quieter, more measured. How are you, Ethan? Really? I'm fine, Mom. You sound tired. I am tired. That's why I'm here. A pause. But he'd never been able to hide anything from her. But nothing. Just processing some things. We'll talk later. Enjoy the drive with him. He sounds happy. He is. He's been talking about this trip for weeks. Another pause. Whatever you're processing, don't let it steal this time with him. He needs you present, not distracted. I know, I will be. I promise. After they hung up, Ethan finished his coffee and headed down to the lobby. It was early enough that the space was relatively quiet. A few guests checking out, one family with luggage gathered near the bell desk, someone reading a newspaper in one of the leather chairs. Jessica stood behind the front desk, looking fresher than she had yesterday, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She was typing something on her computer when Ethan approached. Good morning, he said. She looked up, and he watched recognition flicker across her face. Not of who he was, but of being the guest from yesterday. The one who'd complained, the one who'd been a nuisance. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" Her tone was professional ice, the kind that wasn't rude enough to complain about, but held no warmth whatsoever. "I wanted to confirm that the resort has beach toys available for children, buckets, shovels, that sort of thing. The beach activities desk opens at 9. They have rental equipment." "Rental? There's a charge?" $5 per item, 20 for a full beach set. Ethan nodded slowly. "And if a guest wanted to arrange for that to be set up before the desk opens, for a child arriving this morning, you'd need to contact the activities coordinator directly, but as I mentioned yesterday, they don't start until 9. "I see. Is there a number I could call?" Jessica's fingers paused on her keyboard. "Sir, the activities desk will be open in 2 hours. I'm sure your child can wait that long." "Of course, just trying to make the most of our time." He kept his voice pleasant, factual. "Thank you." He turned away before she could respond and walked toward the windows overlooking the parking area. At 8:15, he saw his mother's sedan pull into the circular drive. His son pressed his face against the back window, scanning the building like he was trying to see through walls. Ethan was through the doors before they'd even parked. "Dad!" His son exploded from the car the moment his grandmother put it in park, running with the uncomplicated joy of 7-year-old momentum. Ethan caught him, lifting him up despite the kid's protest that he was too old for that. "You made it," Ethan said into his son's hair. "We made it. Can we go to the beach right now?" "Let's get your bag from Grandma first. Say hello properly. Maybe use the bathroom." "I don't have to use the bathroom. I went at the gas station. Can we go now?" Ethan's mother approached, moving slower, her smile warm, but her eyes assessing. She'd raised him to read people, and she was reading him now with the precision of someone who knew exactly what worry looked like, even when it was buried under smiles. "Morning, Mom." He set his son down and hugged her properly. "Thank you for bringing him." "Of course." She held on a moment longer than necessary, the kind of hug that said, "I know something's wrong," without words. "You look tired." "I've heard that already today." "Because it's true." She stepped back, studying his face. "But we'll talk later. Right now, someone's about to vibrate out of his skin if he doesn't get to that beach." His son was already pulling at Ethan's hand. "Come on, Dad." They got his bag from the car, a small backpack stuffed with swim trunks, sunscreen, and a collection of small toys he'd insisted on bringing. Ethan's mother declined his invitation to stay, citing the long drive back and errands that needed running. "You two enjoy yourselves," she said, kissing her grandson's forehead. "And Ethan, really enjoy yourself. Don't spend the whole time in your head." "I won't." She gave him a look that said she didn't entirely believe him, but she got back in her car anyway. His son waved until she was out of sight, then immediately resumed his campaign for beach access. Okay, Ethan laughed. "Let's drop your bag in the room and get changed." They headed into the lobby, his son taking everything in with wide eyes, the chandeliers, the marble, the tall windows. "This place is fancy," he said too loud, the way kids do when they're excited. "Inside voice, buddy." "Sorry, but it is fancy." They crossed the lobby toward the elevators. Jessica watched them approach, her expression cycling through neutrality to something Ethan couldn't quite name. Not quite judgment, but a careful assessment. "Excuse me, sir," she called as they passed the desk. Ethan paused. "Yes?" "Children need to maintain appropriate behavior in common areas. Resort policy." His son looked up, suddenly uncertain. Ethan put a hand on his shoulder. "He's excited. We're heading to our room." "Of course, just a reminder." Jessica's smile was the kind that didn't reach anywhere near her eyes. In the elevator, his son was quieter. "Was I too loud?" "You were fine. You're 7. You're allowed to be excited." She seemed mad. "She wasn't mad at you, buddy. Some people just have different ideas about how things should be." "Oh." His son considered this for a moment. "She seems kind of mean." "Let's focus on the fun we're about to have, okay?" "Okay." Room 412 impressed his son in ways the lobby hadn't, specifically the balcony overlooking the ocean. He pressed against the railing, pointing at waves, at birds, at another child building a sandcastle far below. Can we go now? Let me put sunscreen on you first. 20 minutes later, properly sun-protected and wearing swim trunks, they made their way back down to the lobby. The beach access was through a side exit, according to the resort map, past the pool terrace and down a wooden boardwalk. They almost made it. Sir, Jessica's voice stopped them near the pool entrance. She'd left the front desk and now stood with her hands clasped in front of her, her posture rigid with officious authority. Pool and beach access requires proper footwear. No bare feet in common areas. Ethan looked down. His son wore sandals. So did he. We're wearing shoes. Resort-appropriate footwear. Those are beach sandals. We're going to the beach. The policy applies to all common areas, including pathways to the beach. His son's hand tightened in Ethan's. The excitement from moments ago had dimmed, replaced by the confusion of a child trying to understand rules that didn't make sense. What would you consider appropriate footwear for walking to a beach? Ethan kept his voice level, aware of his son listening. Closed-toe shoes, athletic shoes or loafers would be acceptable. So you want us to wear sneakers to the beach, then change into sandals when we get there? I'm simply explaining resort policy, sir. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Not anger exactly, but a cold clarity. He crouched down to his son's level. Buddy, go back to the room and grab my sneakers from the closet, the blue ones. But Dad, I know. Just humor me, okay? We'll still get to the beach. His son trudged back toward the elevators, confusion written across his small shoulders. When he was out of earshot, Ethan stood and faced Jessica directly. You know that policy is absurd, he said quietly. It's resort policy. No, it's a policy you're choosing to enforce right now, for us, in a way I'm quite certain you don't enforce for every guest. He took a step closer, not threatening, just present. My son has been looking forward to this trip for weeks. He's 7 years old. He's excited about seeing the ocean, and you're making him feel like he doesn't belong here. Jessica's expression hardened. Sir, if you have a problem with our policies, I don't have a problem with policies. I have a problem with selective enforcement designed to make certain guests feel unwelcome. That's a serious accusation. It's a factual observation. If you continue to harass my staff, I'll have to call security. Harass? Ethan's voice remained calm, but something in his eyes must have shifted because Jessica took a small step backward. I'm standing here having a conversation. If that feels like harassment, perhaps you should consider why. His son returned with the sneakers, holding them out uncertainly. I got them, Dad. Thank you, buddy. Ethan took the shoes and put them on without breaking eye contact with Jessica. Better? That's appropriate, yes. Wonderful. We'll be going now. They walked past her toward the beach access, his son's small hand back in his. When they were out of Jessica's sight, moving down the wooden boardwalk with ocean wind in their faces, his son looked up. Why was she so weird about our shoes? Ethan considered how to answer that. How to explain systems of exclusion to a 7-year-old. How to talk about judgment and bias without stealing his son's innocence. Sometimes, he said carefully, people create rules that seem like they're about one thing, but they're really about something else. Those rules can make people feel like they don't belong, even when they have every right to be there. That's dumb. Yeah, buddy, it is. Are we still going to have fun? Absolutely. And for the next 3 hours, they did. They built an elaborate sandcastle with a moat that actually held water. They found shells and smooth stones. They jumped waves until his son was laughing so hard he could barely stand. They ate overpriced hot dogs from the beach snack bar and didn't care about the cost. For 3 hours, Ethan was just a father playing with his son, and nothing else mattered. But around noon, when the sun was high and his son was starting to fade from excitement into exhaustion, they headed back toward the resort for lunch and a break from the heat. The pool terrace was crowded now. Families spread across lounge chairs, children splashing in the shallow end, servers moving between tables taking orders for drinks and appetizers. Ethan and his son walked through, sandy and sun-tired, heading for the elevators. Marcus was the one who stopped them this time. Excuse me, sir. He appeared from near the towel station, his expression apologetic but firm. We ask that beach guests rinse off at the outdoor showers before entering the main resort areas. Ethan looked at his son, who was literally swaying on his feet. We're going straight to our room to shower and change. The policy is to use the outdoor facilities first. Helps keep sand out of the building. My son is exhausted. He needs to lie down. I understand, sir, but the policy applies to everyone? Yes, sir. Then why did I just watch that family walk through here dripping wet without anyone stopping them? Ethan pointed to a group disappearing into the lobby, their children leaving puddles on the tile. Marcus's smile became strained. Sir, I'm just doing my job. No, you're not. You're selectively enforcing policies. There's a difference. I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate being singled out. Ethan felt his son lean against his leg, tired and confused. We're going to our room. If you have a problem with that, you can call whoever you need to call. He guided his son toward the elevators before Marcus could respond. In the elevator, his son was quiet, the joy from the morning fading into something else. Are we in trouble? He asked. Nobody, we're not in trouble. Then why does everyone keep stopping us? Ethan knelt down, eye level with his son. You know how sometimes kids at school can be mean? How they make up reasons why someone can't play with them or sit at their table? Yeah. Sometimes adults do that too, they just use fancier words. His son processed this. That's still mean. It is. You're absolutely right. So what do? We don't let them make us feel small. We know our worth, even when other people don't see it. His son nodded, but Ethan could see the day had lost some of its shine. That realization settled in his chest like a stone. They showered and changed, then ordered room service for lunch. His son fell asleep halfway through his sandwich, exhaustion winning out. Ethan moved him to the bed, pulled the curtains to darken the room, and stepped out onto the balcony with his phone. Richard answered on the first ring. How's it going? My son arrived this morning. And the staff has stopped us 4 times in 6 hours for various policy violations. Beach sandals in common areas, not rinsing off before entering the building. I'm fairly certain if we breathe wrong, they'll cite another regulation. Richard was quiet for a moment. They know you complained yesterday. So this is retaliation? I'm saying that word travels fast in small operations teams. If Miranda told Jessica and Marcus that a guest was difficult, and now that guest is back with a child, they're making a point. Potentially. Ethan watched waves through the balcony railing. Tell me about Miranda's performance reviews, the actual ones, not the summary metrics. More keyboard sounds. Okay, on paper, she's strong. Revenue's up 12% under her management. Operational costs are down 8%. Guest satisfaction scores, at least the overall numbers, are within acceptable ranges. But the detailed comments you saw yesterday tell a different story. And now that I'm looking more carefully, there's a pattern to which complaints get escalated versus which ones get managed internally. Meaning complaints from high-spending guests or members get immediate attention and resolution. Complaints from everyone else get investigated and usually deemed unfounded or explained away. It's not technically against policy, but it's discriminatory. I was going to say concerning, but yes. Ethan checked through the balcony door. His son was still sleeping, curled around his stuffed dolphin. What would happen if I walked into that operations office right now and identified myself? Professionally, you'd probably get whatever you wanted. Personally, you'd never know how this property actually operates when nobody thinks the owner is watching. That's what I thought. Ethan turned back to the ocean. Richard, I need you to do something else for me. I'm already not liking your tone. Pull the employment contracts for Miranda Cole, Jessica Winters, and Marcus Chen. I want to know what our termination policies are, what documentation we need, what the legal exposure looks like. Ethan, I'm not making decisions yet. I'm gathering information. You're thinking about firing them. I'm thinking about accountability. There's a difference. Richard sighed. I'll have the contracts and HR policies sent over by tonight. But Ethan, if you're going to do this, you need to be absolutely certain. Wrongful termination suits, public relations nightmares, staff morale issues, this could get complicated fast. More complicated than running properties where guests are treated with contempt based on their appearance. Point taken. I'll get you what you need. After they hung up, Ethan sat on the balcony until his son woke up an hour later, groggy and disoriented. They spent the afternoon playing cards, watching movies, ordering ice cream from room service. His son's mood improved with rest and sugar, the morning's unpleasantness fading into background noise. At 5 o'clock, Ethan's phone buzzed with an email from Richard. 3 employment contracts, 2 HR policy documents, and a cover note. Read the section on immediate termination for cause. Page 12. We included very specific language about discrimination and guest mistreatment. This was your idea 5 years ago. You were preparing for exactly this scenario. Ethan opened the contracts and read page 12. The language was clear. Any employee found to be engaging in discriminatory practices, creating hostile environments for guests, or violating the company's core values of dignity and respect could be terminated immediately without severance, pending review of evidence. He'd written that clause himself after watching another luxury property implode over a discrimination lawsuit. He'd insisted on it over the lawyer's objections, arguing that protecting bad actors was worse than the legal exposure. Now it was waiting to be used. Dad? His son looked up from the card game they'd been playing. Are you okay? I'm fine, buddy, just thinking. About work? A little bit. You promised this was vacation. You're right, I did. Ethan put his phone away. Sorry, deal the cards, your turn. They played until dinner, then headed down to the resort restaurant, a semi-formal space with white tablecloths and ocean views. The hostess seated them without incident. The server was genuinely kind, and for 90 minutes they ate good food and talked about everything except resort policies and mean staff members. Walking back through the lobby afterward, full and content, his son spotted the concierge desk where someone had set up a display of local shells and sea glass. Can we look? He asked. Of course. They were examining a particularly large conch shell when Ethan heard the voice behind him. Some guests have no sense of boundaries. He turned. Miranda Cole stood near the front desk with another woman in a manager's uniform, both holding tablets, both speaking in voices just loud enough to carry. I know, the other woman said. Jessica mentioned him, the one who caused problems yesterday? Among others. Honestly, I don't know why people who clearly can't afford this level of property insist on booking here. They spend the whole time complaining that they're not being treated like royalty. Ethan's son tugged his sleeve. Dad, can we get this shell? 1 second, buddy. He kept his eyes on Miranda, watching her lean closer to her colleague, their conversation continuing. And now he's brought a child, running around, making noise, tracking sand everywhere. The pool staff mentioned having to ask them twice about proper footwear. Some people just don't understand luxury hospitality standards. Miranda laughed. Exactly. They see the pictures online and think they belong, but they don't have the... She paused, searching for a word. The refinement. You can always tell. The other manager nodded knowingly. It's exhausting, isn't it? Maintaining standards while dealing with guests who fundamentally don't fit the environment. Ethan felt his son's hand slip into his own, small and uncertain. His son had heard them. Maybe not every word, but enough. Enough to understand they were being talked about. Enough to feel the judgment. He looked down at his son's face, confusion mixing with hurt, the particular expression of a child learning that sometimes the world is unkind for no reason they can understand. And something in Ethan's chest turned to steel. Buddy, he said quietly, crouching down. Go back to the room. I'll be up in a few minutes. Are you sure? I'm sure. Take the shell with you. He pressed the room key into his son's hand. I just need to talk to someone about tomorrow's activities. His son glanced at Miranda and her colleague, then back at Ethan. Okay, don't be long. I won't. He watched his son walk to the elevators, clutching the conch shell, his small shoulders carrying something heavier than seashells and vacation souvenirs. Then Ethan stood up and walked directly toward Miranda Cole. She saw him coming and her expression shifted, first to recognition, then to barely concealed irritation. She turned to her colleague. I'll handle this. Can you check on the dinner service numbers? The other manager left quickly, sensing tension. Ethan stopped 3 feet from Miranda, close enough to speak quietly, far enough to keep the encounter professional. Ms. Cole, he said. Mr. Brooks? Her voice was ice wrapped in professional courtesy. Is there something I can help you with? I wanted to inform you that I heard every word of your conversation just now. I'm not sure what you're referring to. You were discussing guests who don't fit your standards, guests who lack refinement, guests who track sand and make noise. Miranda's jaw tightened. If you were eavesdropping on a private conversation between staff members, you were standing in the middle of the lobby. There was nothing private about it. Ethan kept his voice level, his words precise. And my 7-year-old son heard you. He understood that you were talking about us, about him. Sir, if you misinterpreted, I didn't misinterpret anything. You made it very clear that you believe certain guests don't belong here, that we're beneath your standards, that our presence is an inconvenience to your refined environment. Miranda's professional mask cracked slightly, showing the irritation beneath. Mr. Brooks, I've been more than patient with your complaints, but this is becoming harassment. If you continue to approach me with accusations, what would you do? Call security? Have me removed? Banned from future reservations? Ethan stepped closer, not threatening, but absolutely present. Go ahead. Make that call. I'd be very interested to see how that conversation goes. Something in his tone made Miranda pause, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done being invisible, done being dismissed, done watching my son learn that his worth is determined by other people's judgment. Ethan's voice remained quiet, but every word carried weight. So make your call, Miss Cole. Exercise your authority. Show me exactly who you are. Miranda's hand moved toward her phone, then stopped. She was calculating, trying to determine if this was a battle worth fighting, if this guest was worth the administrative hassle. Ethan watched her hesitate and knew exactly what she was thinking. He'd seen it 100 times in business negotiations, the moment when someone realizes they might not hold all the cards they thought they did. That's what I thought, he said softly. You're very confident when you think there are no consequences. I don't have to stand here and listen to this. Miranda's voice rose slightly, professional control slipping. You've been nothing but difficult since you arrived, demanding special treatment, accusing my staff of discrimination, making scenes in my lobby. I asked for basic respect. That's not special treatment. That's humanity. You asked for preferential check-in times, complained about standard policies, and now you're creating a hostile situation because you overheard a conversation that had nothing to do with you. It had everything to do with me. You said my name. You discussed my son. Ethan's calm was absolute now, the kind of stillness that comes before storms. And here's what's going to happen. I'm going back to my room. I'm going to spend tomorrow with my son, giving him the peaceful vacation I promised him. And then we're going to have a longer conversation about what kind of environment you're creating here. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. Miranda drew herself up, trying to reclaim authority. Mr. Brooks, I think it would be best if you checked out early. I'll arrange a full refund, but clearly this property isn't the right fit for your family. There it is. Ethan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The quiet removal. Make the uncomfortable guest disappear. Frame it as a courtesy. Very professional, Ms. Cole. I'm trying to resolve a situation that's become untenable. For whom? For you? Because you're uncomfortable having someone call you out on behavior you've gotten away with for months? I've gotten away with nothing. I run an efficient, profitable property that maintains the highest standards, at the cost of treating human beings with dignity. Ethan cut her off, his voice sharp now. Your numbers might be strong, but your values are bankrupt. Miranda's face flushed. You have no idea what you're talking about. You don't understand the hospitality industry. You don't understand luxury clientele. And you certainly don't understand what it takes to maintain a property like this. You're right. I don't understand. Explain it to me. Excuse me? Explain how treating people with contempt maintains standards. Explain how making a 7-year-old feel unwelcome serves your luxury clientele. I'm genuinely curious about the business logic. Miranda opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. You're twisting everything I've said. I'm repeating what you said. The words came from you. Ethan pulled out his phone. Would you like me to play back the recording? Her eyes widened. You recorded a private conversation? I recorded a public statement made in a lobby. There's a difference. He hadn't actually recorded anything, but Miranda didn't know that. So please, explain your philosophy. Tell me how dignity is earned rather than given. I'd love to include that in my report. Your report? Miranda's voice cracked slightly. What report? To whom? That depends entirely on what happens next. They stood in the lobby, the evening crowd flowing around them, guests heading to dinner, children being herded toward bedrooms, staff moving through their duties. The ocean beyond the windows was darkening, the last light fading from the sky. Miranda's confidence was fracturing now, her professional armor developing cracks. Mr. Brooks, I think we should continue this conversation in my office, away from guests. So we can have another private discussion where you tell me I don't belong? No, thank you. That's not, I didn't mean... She was scrambling now, trying to find footing on ground that had shifted beneath her. Look, if there's been a misunderstanding, there's been no misunderstanding. You've been very clear about your position, multiple times, in multiple ways. Ethan pocketed his phone. Now I'm being equally clear about mine. Tomorrow, my son and I will use this resort exactly as we've paid to do. We will not be stopped, questioned, or made to feel unwelcome. If any of your staff approaches us with another invented policy violation, there will be consequences. Do you understand? You can't threaten my staff. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm establishing boundaries, something you seem to struggle with. He turned toward the elevators. Good night, Ms. Cole. I suggest you think very carefully about what kind of manager you want to be. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing in the lobby with her tablet and her shattered authority. In the elevator, alone, Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His hands were steady, his heart rate elevated but controlled. He'd spent years learning to manage confrontation without losing his center, and tonight he'd needed every bit of that practice. Room 412 was dark except for the light from the bathroom. His son had fallen asleep on top of the covers, still in his clothes, the conch shell clutched in one hand. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, watching his son sleep, and made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow would still be for his son. Beach time, laughter, uncomplicated joy. But the day after tomorrow wouldn't just be about accountability anymore. It would be about ensuring no other child ever walked through that lobby and felt the way his son had felt tonight. His phone buzzed, a message from Richard. Got your contracts, standing by. Whatever you're planning, I trust your judgment. Ethan typed back, not planning, preparing. There's a difference. Then he pulled a blanket over his sleeping son, turned off the light, and stood on the balcony listening to waves reshape the shore in darkness, preparing for the moment when the tide would turn completely. The morning broke clear and warm, sunlight streaming through the balcony doors with the kind of brightness that promised a perfect beach day. Ethan woke before his son, moved quietly through his morning routine, and stood watching the ocean while coffee cooled in his hands. Today would be exactly what he'd promised, a day of joy, of building memories, of being present. Everything else could wait. His son stirred around 7:30, stretching like a cat before his eyes opened. Is it beach day again? All day if you want. Yes! He bounced out of bed with the instant energy only children possess. Can we find more shells and build an even bigger castle and maybe see dolphins? We can try for all of that. They dressed quickly, grabbing towels and sunscreen. Ethan had learned from yesterday. They wore their beach sandals from the room, avoiding any potential confrontation about footwear. When they reached the lobby, it was Marcus behind the desk this time, his expression carefully neutral when he saw them approaching. Ethan nodded a greeting but didn't stop, guiding his son directly toward the beach access. Marcus watched them go but said nothing. Smart choice, Ethan thought. The beach was nearly empty this early, just a few joggers and one person doing Tai Chi near the water's edge. The sand was cool under their feet, still holding the night's temperature. His son ran ahead, arms spread wide, spinning in circles like he could embrace the entire ocean. Dad, come on! Ethan jogged to catch up, and for the next 4 hours the resort and its problems ceased to exist. They built not just a castle, but an entire kingdom, complete with walls, towers, a drawbridge made from driftwood, and a flag fashioned from a stick and his son's bandana. They collected shells until their bucket overflowed. They jumped waves until their legs ached. They saw 3 pelicans diving for fish in a school of tiny silverfish that scattered like liquid mercury when his son tried to catch them. Around noon, dripping and sandy and completely content, they headed up to the pool deck for lunch. The restaurant there served burgers and fish tacos, casual fare meant for families fresh from the beach. They found a table with an umbrella, ordered food, and his son chattered nonstop about everything they'd seen and done. "This is the best vacation ever," he announced, ketchup on his chin, happiness radiating from every pore. "I'm glad, buddy. Can we come back next year?" The question landed harder than his son could have known. Ethan looked around the deck, the sparkling pool, the attentive servers, the families enjoying their meals. All of it beautiful, all of it functioning, all of it built on foundations that were rotting from within. "Maybe," he said carefully. "We'll see." "You always say that when you mean probably not." Ethan smiled despite himself. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just notice more now." They finished lunch and his son wanted to swim in the pool. Ethan sat on a lounge chair nearby, watchful, as his son played with other children who'd gravitated together the way kids do, instant friendships based on nothing more than proximity and pool toys. A woman sat down on the chair next to his, a book in her hands. She looked over and smiled. "Yours is the one with the red swim trunks?" "That's him." "Mine's the girl in the pink goggles. They seem to be getting along." "Nothing like a pool to break down social barriers." She laughed. "If only adults were that easy." She opened her book, then paused. "Can I ask you something? And feel free to tell me it's none of my business." "Go ahead." "Did you have any trouble with the staff here? When you checked in, or just in general?" Ethan turned to look at her more carefully. She was maybe 40, wearing sunglasses, her expression difficult to read. "Why do you ask?" "Because we did. My husband and I. Nothing I could quite put my finger on, but it felt like we were being, I don't know, tolerated rather than welcomed. Like we didn't quite fit some invisible standard." She glanced at him. "I noticed yesterday that you seemed to be having some kind of conversation with the front desk staff. Looked tense." "It was." "So it's not just us?" "No, it's not just you." She nodded slowly, like he'd confirmed something she'd suspected. "We're leaving tomorrow, cutting our trip short, actually. My daughter loves it here, but the vibe from the staff is making my husband and me so uncomfortable that it's not worth staying." She watched her daughter splash in the pool. "I feel ridiculous even saying that out loud. Like, who complains about staff being too professional? But there's something cold about it. Something that makes me feel like they're judging whether we deserve to be here." "You're not imagining it," Ethan said quietly, "and you're not ridiculous." "Have you complained? Officially, I mean?" "In a manner of speaking." "Did it help?" "Not yet, but it might." She studied him for a moment, curiosity evident even behind her sunglasses. "You don't seem like the type to let things go easily." "I'm not?" "Good. Someone should push back. This place is too beautiful to be run by people who make families feel unwelcome." She returned to her book. "I hope whatever you're planning works." They sat in companionable silence after that, watching their children play, until his son wore himself out and declared he was ready for a nap. Back in the room, his son collapsed on the bed almost immediately, asleep before Ethan could even close the curtains. Ethan's phone rang. "Richard." "How's today going?" Richard asked. "Better. We've avoided the staff for the most part." "Well, good strategy." "Listen, I've been doing more digging into the complaint records. You asked me to look at patterns, so I built a database of every guest complaint from the past year, categorized by type and resolution." "And?" "The pattern is worse than I thought. Complaints from guests who book through discount sites or during promotional periods, 92% are marked as unfounded or explained away. Complaints from loyalty program members or guests who book premium suites, 78% result in compensatory actions, upgrades, refunds, amenities. So it's systematic. It's not just systematic, it's documented. There are literally notes in the system about guest value assessment and appropriate service calibration. Ethan, Miranda has been training her staff to tier their service based on perceived guest worth. Ethan closed his eyes. Send me everything. Screenshots, database exports, internal memos. Anything that shows intent. Already done. Check your email. But Ethan, this is going to get messy. If you move forward with terminations, she's going to claim she was following industry standards. She'll probably lawyer up. Letter. We have our own standards. They're written into every employment contract. Send me the employee handbook section on discrimination and guest treatment protocols, too. You're building a case. I'm preparing for accountability. There's still a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, you've already made your decision. Ethan looked at his sleeping son, at the peaceful expression on his face, at the complete trust that tomorrow would be good, because his father had promised it would be. Yes, he said. I have. Then I'm with you. Whatever you need. I need you ready to move quickly, tomorrow morning. Can you have HR standing by? For terminations? For whatever becomes necessary. Richard was quiet for a moment. Okay, but Ethan, once you do this, you can't unring that bell. The staff will know who you are. This whole invisibility experiment ends. Good. I'm tired of being invisible. They talked logistics for another 20 minutes. Documentation requirements, legal exposure, communication protocols. By the time they hung up, Ethan had a plan that was thorough, defensible, and completely irreversible once set in motion. His son woke an hour later, groggy but cheerful. They spent the late afternoon on the balcony, playing cards and eating snacks from the minibar that cost 3 times what they should, but tasted good anyway. His son talked about school, about his friends, about whether dolphins were smarter than dogs, and why couldn't they have both as pets. Normal conversation. Normal moments. The kind of afternoon that would become a memory his son would carry forward. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because his father was fully present, fully engaged, fully there. At 6, they dressed for dinner. The resort's main restaurant this time, the formal one that required reservations. Ethan had made them weeks ago, back when this trip was just a pleasant idea rather than a test of principles. The hostess greeted them with professional warmth, checked her list, and led them to a table by the windows. Their server introduced himself as David, asked about allergies and preferences, and brought his son a Shirley Temple with extra cherries without being asked. You gentlemen enjoying your stay? David asked while setting down water glasses. Very much, Ethan said. The beach is incredible. It's something special, isn't it? I've worked here 3 years and I still stop sometimes just to look at it. David smiled at his son. And what's been your favorite part? We built a castle with 17 towers, his son announced proudly. 17. That's very precise architecture. Are you an engineer? Not yet. Maybe when I grow up. Well, when you are, come back and build us something amazing. David handed them menus. Take your time looking these over. I'll be back in a few minutes. The meal was excellent. Fresh seafood, perfectly cooked, presented beautifully. David checked on them regularly but never hovered, somehow knowing exactly when they needed something and when to leave them alone. It was, Ethan thought, what good service actually looked like when it wasn't contaminated by judgment. They were finishing dessert, key lime pie for Ethan, chocolate cake for his son, when Miranda Cole entered the restaurant. She saw them immediately. Ethan watched the recognition cross her face, followed by calculation, then a decision. She crossed the dining room with purpose, her expression set in professional pleasantness that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mr. Brooks, she said, stopping beside their table, I hope you are enjoying your evening. We are, thank you. Excellent. I wanted to follow up on our conversation from yesterday. Perhaps we could speak privately for a moment? Her gaze flicked to his son, the implication clear. This was an appropriate discussion for children's ears. I'm in the middle of dinner with my son. Of course, I understand, but I think it would be beneficial for both of us if we could clear the air. Just a few minutes of your time. Ethan set down his fork, wiped his mouth with his napkin, and looked directly at her. Ms. Cole, anything you have to say to me can be said right here. I don't think that's appropriate. I disagree. You've made public comments about my family. You've had your staff stop us repeatedly in public spaces. You've created an environment where a 7-year-old boy feels unwelcome. So please, by all means, clear the air. Publicly. Miranda's jaw tightened. Around them, other diners were starting to notice the tension, conversations quieting, attention shifting. She was trapped between professional image and personal irritation, and Ethan could see her struggling to choose. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "we've had some miscommunication. Service standards can sometimes be perceived as..." "Stop." Ethan's voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. "Don't insult both of us with corporate speak. You know exactly what's been happening. You've orchestrated it. Now you're here doing damage control because you realize there might be consequences." "Mr. Brooks, I came here to extend an olive branch. No, you came here to manage a situation that's spiraling beyond your control. There's a difference." He glanced at his son, who was watching with wide eyes. "Chocolate cake, forgotten. Buddy, why don't you take that last piece to the table by the window? You can watch the boats while I finish talking to Ms. Cole." His son looked between them, uncertain. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Take your cake. I'll be right there." His son slid out of his chair and moved to the window table, leaving Ethan and Miranda in a small bubble of tension. "You're making a scene," Miranda hissed, her professional mask cracking. "I'm having a conversation. You're the one making it dramatic." "This is my restaurant. This is a restaurant you manage. There's a difference there, too." Ethan leaned back in his chair, completely calm. "Let me tell you what's going to happen tomorrow, Ms. Cole. I'm going to spend the morning with my son. We're going to have breakfast, play on the beach, enjoy the facilities we've paid to access, and we're going to do all of that without being stopped, questioned, or made to feel like we're somehow less than anyone else in this building. I've already instructed my staff. I'm not finished. Tomorrow afternoon, after my son leaves with his grandmother, you and I are going to have a very different conversation. One where I'm no longer just an inconvenient guest you can dismiss or manage. One where you're going to answer for every policy you've selectively enforced, every complaint you've buried, every guest you've made feel invisible." Miranda's face had gone pale. "Who do you think you are? Tomorrow afternoon, you'll find out. Until then, I suggest you reflect very carefully on your choices." Ethan stood, pulled cash from his wallet to cover the bill and a generous tip for David, and walked to the window table where his son sat watching boats. "Ready to go, buddy?" "Yeah." His son took his hand. "Was she mad at you?" "She was worried. Different thing." They walked through the restaurant together, past tables where conversations resumed in their wake, past Miranda standing frozen by their abandoned table, past the hostess, who smiled and wished them a pleasant evening. In the elevator, his son looked up at him. "Dad, what's happening?" "Really?" Ethan knelt down, eye level with his son in the empty elevator. "You know how I always tell you to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard?" "Yeah. I'm doing that. Some people here have been treating others badly, and I'm going to make sure it stops." "Is that why everyone's been weird to us?" "Partly, yes." His son processed this. "Are we in trouble?" "No, buddy, we're not in trouble, but some other people might be." "Good. They're mean. They are. But we're going to handle it the right way. Not with meanness back, but with truth and fairness." His son nodded seriously. "Like you always say, be kind, but don't be a doormat." Ethan smiled. "Exactly like that." "When did you get so wise?" "I've been listening." Back in their room, they watched a movie until his son fell asleep halfway through, curled up with his stuffed dolphin. Ethan carried him to bed, tucked him in, and returned to the balcony with his laptop. Richard had sent 14 files: complaint databases, internal memos, training documents, email chains. Ethan read through all of them, methodically building a picture of systematic bias disguised as professional standards. One email particularly stood out, from Miranda to her management team 3 months ago. "Reminder to all staff, our target demographic is affluent professionals and families. Service calibration should reflect guest value. Time and resources should be allocated accordingly. Remember that not all reservations represent equal revenue potential." Another, from Jessica to Marcus last month. "Guy at desk asking about late checkout. Checked his booking, discount rate through third-party site. Told him no availability. We have 3 rooms empty, but they're being held for potential upgrades. Don't waste premium inventory on low-value guests." And another, This one from Miranda's assistant to housekeeping. Miranda wants priority cleaning for suites and loyalty program rooms. Standard rooms can wait if we're behind schedule. The people paying premium prices shouldn't suffer because we're accommodating discount bookings. Page after page of evidence. Nothing explicitly illegal, but all of it violating the core principles that Ethan had built his company on. That every guest deserved dignity, that service wasn't a commodity to be rationed based on perceived worth, that hospitality meant seeing the humanity in everyone who walked through the door. At 11 p.m., he composed an email to Richard. Move forward with preparations. I'll make the final call tomorrow, but start getting everything in place. We're going to need HR, legal, and probably crisis communications. This is going to be bigger than just 3 terminations. Richard's response came back within minutes. Already on it. Team will be standing by tomorrow. Ethan, are you absolutely certain? Ethan looked through the balcony doors at his sleeping son, at the innocence and trust visible even in sleep. He thought about the woman by the pool, cutting her vacation short because the staff made her feel unwelcome. He thought about all the complaint records he'd read, all the guests who'd been dismissed and diminished. He typed back, "I've never been more certain of anything in my professional life." Then he closed his laptop and stood at the balcony railing, listening to the ocean's nighttime rhythm. The waves sounded different in darkness, more insistent, more powerful, like they were working harder to reshape the shore when nobody was watching. Tomorrow morning would be joy and sandcastles and his son's laughter. Tomorrow afternoon would be accountability. He checked his watch. Almost midnight. In 9 hours, his son would wake up ready for one more perfect beach day. In 12 hours, his mother would arrive to take his son home. And in 13 hours, Ethan would walk into Miranda Cole's office and stop being invisible. His phone buzzed one last time. A message from Richard. Whatever happens tomorrow, you're doing the right thing. Sleep well. Ethan smiled in the darkness. Sleep would be difficult tonight, but not because of doubt, because of certainty, because of the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade, consequences that couldn't be reversed, changes that would ripple through this property and potentially others. He'd spent 5 years building a company on principles that sounded good in mission statements and looked impressive on websites. Tomorrow he'd find out if those principles meant anything when tested against human comfort and professional convenience. He went inside, set his alarm for 6 a.m., and lay down on the bed next to his son. Through the open balcony door, the ocean kept its steady rhythm, wave after wave after wave, each one carrying away what came before, each one building toward what came next. Morning would arrive whether he was ready or not. The tide would turn whether he wanted it to or not. And Miranda Cole would learn who Ethan Brooks actually was, whether she was prepared for that knowledge or not. He closed his eyes and let the sound of waves pull him towards sleep, knowing that the next time he stood in that lobby, everything would be different. The invisibility experiment was over. The reckoning had begun. And somewhere in the administrative wing, filed away in employment contracts and company policies, the language he'd written 5 years ago waited to be used. Any employee found to be engaging in discriminatory practices or creating hostile environments shall be subject to immediate termination for cause. He'd written those words hoping they'd never be needed. Tomorrow, he'd find out exactly how powerful they were. His son shifted in sleep, reaching out unconsciously. Ethan took his small hand, held it gently, and made a silent promise, not just to his son, but to every guest who'd ever been made to feel invisible, every person who'd been judged and found wanting based on nothing but appearances. The promise was simple. Tomorrow, dignity would stop being negotiable. Tomorrow, respect would be more than a word in a mission statement. Tomorrow, the invisible guest would become impossible to ignore, and the ocean outside kept its rhythm, indifferent to human drama, reshaping the shore one wave at a time, patient and relentless, and absolutely certain that morning always came, bringing with it whatever the tide had decided to change. The alarm didn't wake Ethan because he was already awake, had been since 5:30, watching dawn paint the ocean in shades of pink and gold. His son slept on, undisturbed, the peace of childhood evident in every relaxed muscle. Ethan showered quietly, dressed, and was sitting on the balcony with coffee when his son finally stirred. "Morning, buddy. Is it beach time?" The question came muffled through blankets and sleepiness. "After breakfast. Your grandma's coming at noon, remember? So we've got the whole morning. That got him moving. Within 20 minutes, they were dressed and heading down to the breakfast buffet, his son chattering about whether they'd find any sand dollars today and if pelicans ever got tired of eating fish. The breakfast room was crowded with families, the buffet tables laden with everything from fresh fruit to made-to-order omelets. They loaded their plates and found a table near the windows. A different server than yesterday, an older woman named Patricia who smiled warmly at his son and brought him orange juice without being asked. "You two have plans for today?" she asked while refilling Ethan's coffee. "Beach until lunch," his son announced. "Then Grandma's taking me home, but Dad's staying." "Well, enjoy every minute of that beach. Days like this don't come around often enough." It was such a simple interaction, such basic kindness, and it stood in stark contrast to everything else they'd experienced. Ethan thanked her and left a larger tip than the breakfast warranted. The morning unfolded exactly as promised. Sand, waves, laughter. They found 2 sand dollars, both perfectly intact. They built one final castle, this one with a moat so deep it stayed filled even between waves. His son raced up and down the beach, collecting stones that looked interesting, shouting observations about birds and boats, and whether that dark spot in the water might be a dolphin. At 11:30, sandy and happy and tired, they headed back to shower and pack his son's bag. Ethan's mother arrived precisely at noon, punctual as always, her sedan pulling into the circular drive just as they reached the lobby. His son ran to meet her, talking so fast about dolphins and castles and shells that the words tumbled over each other. She hugged him, laughed at his enthusiasm, then looked over his head at Ethan with the particular expression of a mother who knew her son was about to do something significant. "Walk me to the car?" she said. Ethan helped load his son's bag into the trunk while his son climbed into the back seat, already absorbed in organizing his shell collection. His mother stood by the driver's door, keys in hand, studying Ethan's face. "You're staying," she said. Not a question. "I'm staying." "To do what exactly?" "What needs to be done?" She was quiet for a moment, looking past him at the resort's pristine facade. "Your father used to say that the measure of a person wasn't how they treated people who could help them, but how they treated people who couldn't. He'd be proud of whatever you're about to do. Or he'd tell me I'm being reckless. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." She touched his arm. "Be careful, not just legally, but emotionally. Don't let anger drive this, even righteous anger. Stay clear, stay fair, and remember why you're doing it." "For him." Ethan glanced at his son, visible through the car window, counting shells. "For every kid who shouldn't have to learn that their worth is conditional." "Then you already know what you need to do." She hugged him properly, the kind of embrace that conveyed both support and worry. "Call me when it's over." He watched them drive away, his son's hand waving through the back window until the car disappeared around the curve of the drive. Then he stood in the sunshine, feeling the weight of what came next settle onto his shoulders, and walked back into the lobby. Jessica was at the front desk. She looked up as he entered, her expression cycling through the now familiar progression of recognition, wariness, and thinly veiled hostility. "Mr. Brooks, can I help you with something?" "I need to speak with Miranda Cole. Is she in her office?" "Miss Cole is quite busy. If you'd like to leave a message, I'll wait." "In her office." "Sir, you can't just walk into the administrative wing. Watch me." He crossed the lobby before she could respond, moving with purpose down the corridor toward the operations office. Behind him, he heard Jessica on the phone, her voice urgent but too quiet to make out words. Didn't matter. Miranda would know he was coming in about 30 seconds regardless. The operations office door was closed. Ethan knocked once, a courtesy more than a request, and entered. Miranda sat behind her desk, phone to her ear, and her eyes widened when she saw him. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, and hung up. "Mr. Brooks, you can't just... We need to talk. Now. I'm in the middle of I don't care what you're in the middle of. This conversation is happening. You can choose whether it happens calmly and privately or whether I have it in your lobby in front of your guests. Your choice." Miranda's face flushed, anger and something else, maybe fear, flickering across her features. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm offering you options. That's more courtesy than you've extended to anyone who didn't meet your standards." Ethan closed the door behind him, and moved to stand in front of her desk. I'm going to ask you some direct questions, and I'd like direct answers. I don't have to answer anything. You're right, you don't. But I'd think very carefully about whether stonewalling is your best strategy right now. She stared at him, calculation visible in her eyes. Finally, she set down her pen. Fine. Ask your questions. How long have you been training your staff to tier their service based on perceived guest value? I have no idea what you're talking about. Ethan pulled out his phone, opened his email, and began reading. Reminder to all staff. Our target demographic is affluent professionals and families. Service calibration should reflect guest value. Time and resources should be allocated accordingly. He looked up. That's from an email you sent 3 months ago. Would you like me to read more? Miranda's composure cracked slightly. Where did you get that? Answer the question. How long have you been implementing discriminatory service practices? They're not discriminatory. They're efficient. Every luxury property operates this way, prioritizing high-value guests, managing resources appropriately. Every luxury property violates their own stated values because I distinctly remember this resort's mission statement mentioning something about treating every guest with dignity and respect. In theory, yes, but in practice, you decide who deserves dignity based on what they're wearing and how they book their room. Ethan's voice remained level, but each word landed with precision. You've created a system where a 7-year-old child gets stopped 4 times in one day for imaginary policy violations, where a family cuts their vacation short because your staff makes them feel unwelcome, where complaint after complaint gets buried because the guests filing them don't meet your definition of valuable. You don't understand the hospitality industry. I understand basic human decency. Apparently that's something you've forgotten. Miranda stood up, her hands pressed flat against her desk. You have no right to come into my office and lecture me about how to run this property. I've increased revenue 12%. Operational costs are down, guest satisfaction scores are artificially inflated because you only count feedback from guests you deem worthy of caring about. Ethan stepped closer to the desk. I've read your complaint logs, Miranda. I've seen how you categorize guests, how you train staff to identify low-value reservations and adjust service accordingly, how you've built an entire operational philosophy around the idea that some people simply don't deserve the same treatment as others. That's business. That's reality. Miranda's voice rose, professional control slipping. You can't run a luxury property by treating discount rate guests the same as people who book premium suites. The economics don't work. The model fails. The model is already failing. You're just too focused on revenue numbers to see it. My numbers are strong. Your numbers are garbage. Ethan pulled out his phone again. You want to talk about guest satisfaction? Let's talk about the real numbers, the ones that don't make it into your polished reports. He began reading again. Guest reported feeling discriminated against based on appearance. Investigation concluded no policy violation. Matter closed. That's from 3 weeks ago. Want another? Family complained about being ignored while staff helped other guests. Review found staff were busy with other tasks. No action taken. Should I continue? I have about 60 more just like these. Miranda's face had gone pale. Those complaints were thoroughly investigated. They were dismissed. There's a difference. Ethan set his phone on her desk. Let me ask you something else. When I checked in 2 days ago, when you looked at me and decided I didn't belong here, what exactly were you judging? My clothes? My suitcase? The fact that I didn't arrive in a luxury car with a driver? I didn't judge. You told me to my face that people like me should go stay at a Holiday Inn. You said I needed to earn respect by dressing better and acting like I belonged. Those were your exact words. I was frustrated. You were honest. For once. You said what you actually believe, that dignity is something people have to earn based on their appearance and perceived wealth. Ethan's voice dropped, became quieter but somehow harder. Let me tell you what I believe. I believe every person who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with respect. Not because of what they're wearing or how much they're spending, but because they're human beings. That's not idealism. That's not naivety. That's basic decency. In a perfect world, maybe, but this is a business. This is my business. The words hung in the air between them. Miranda blinked, confusion crossing her face. What? My business, my company, my resort. Ethan watched understanding begin to dawn in her eyes. My name is Ethan Brooks. I'm the founder and CEO of Brooks Hospitality Group, the company that owns this property, the company that employed you, past tense. Miranda's legs seemed to give out. She sat down heavily in her chair, her mouth opening and closing without sound. I built this resort 5 years ago, Ethan continued, his voice calm, factual. I designed every aspect of its operation around the principle that hospitality means seeing the humanity in every guest. I wrote the mission statement you've been ignoring. I created the employee handbook you've been violating. And I specifically included termination language for employees who engage in discriminatory practices because I knew someday someone would test whether those values were real or just words on paper. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. Because I was invisible to you. Just another guest who didn't meet your standards, someone not worth your attention or respect. Ethan leaned forward, hands on her desk. But that invisibility gave me something valuable. It showed me exactly how this property operates when nobody thinks the owner is watching. It showed me what you really believe, what you've been teaching your staff to believe. Mr. Brooks, please, I can explain. I don't want explanations. I want accountability. He straightened up. Effective immediately, your employment with Brooks Hospitality Group is terminated for cause. You will have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings and leave the property. HR will contact you regarding final payment and benefits, but you will receive no severance. All of this is fully documented and legally defensible, so I'd suggest you don't waste time or money on attorneys. Miranda's face had gone from pale to ashen. You can't do this. I can. I am. It's done. Ethan pulled out his phone and made a call. Richard, I'm in Miranda's office. Can you conference in HR and legal? He waited a moment, then put the phone on speaker. Miranda Cole is being terminated for cause effective immediately. Please send security to escort her from the property and have HR process the termination paperwork according to protocol. Understood. Richard's voice came through the speaker. Ethan, we have Jessica Winters and Marcus Chen standing by as well. Are we moving forward with all three? Ethan looked at Miranda, who sat frozen behind her desk, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. Yes, all three. Same cause, same protocol. Copy that. Security is on the way, should be there in 2 minutes. Thank you, Richard. Ethan ended the call and pocketed his phone. You have 1 hour, Miranda. I suggest you use it productively. This is insane. Miranda's voice came out shaky, her professional composure completely shattered. You can't terminate 3 managers simultaneously. The property will be fine. I have an interim management team arriving this afternoon. They'll conduct a full operational review and implement immediate changes to ensure we're actually living up to our stated values. Over what? Over me enforcing industry standard practices? Over running an efficient operation? Over you creating a hostile environment for guests based on their appearance and perceived worth? Over systematically discriminating against people who didn't meet your arbitrary standards? Over teaching your staff that some human beings deserve respect and others don't? Ethan moved toward the door. I gave you power, Miranda. I trusted you to run this property according to principles that matter to me. You used that power to make people feel small, to make my son feel unwelcome in a place I built. That's not efficiency. That's cruelty. Your son, understanding flickered across her face. The boy with you, that was your son? That was my son, who heard you making disparaging comments about guests who don't fit your refined standards, who was stopped repeatedly for violating policies you selectively enforce, who asked me why the staff here were so mean. Ethan opened the door. He's 7 years old, Miranda, and you made him feel like he didn't belong. I didn't know. You didn't care to know. That's the problem. He stepped into the hallway where 2 security officers were approaching. These gentlemen will wait while you collect your things. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. He left her there, surrounded by security, the reality of consequences finally becoming undeniable. In the lobby, Jessica and Marcus stood near the front desk, both looking pale and uncertain. A woman Ethan didn't recognize, presumably from HR, was speaking with them quietly, paperwork in hand. Jessica saw him first. Her eyes widened with recognition, not of a difficult guest anymore, but of the person who just dismantled her employment in a matter of minutes. "Mr. Brooks?" she started, her voice shaking. "Please, I was just following Ms. Cole's training. She told us that service calibration was standard practice. You're adults, Jessica. You made choices." Ethan stopped a few feet from the desk. "Every time you ignored a guest, every time you manufactured a policy violation, every time you looked at someone and decided they weren't worth your courtesy, those were your choices. Miranda created the system, but you participated willingly. We were just doing our jobs. No, you were protecting your comfort at the expense of other people's dignity." He looked at Marcus, who stood silent, his face a mask of shock. "You want to know the saddest part? Some of your colleagues, people like Patricia in the breakfast room, David in the restaurant, the young man who brings room service, they somehow managed to treat every guest with kindness without needing special training or supervision. Basic human decency isn't complicated. You just chose not to practice it." The HR representative stepped forward. "Mr. Brooks, we have the termination paperwork ready for signatures." "Thank you. Let's process everything quickly and professionally." He turned back to Jessica and Marcus. "You'll each have 1 hour to collect your personal items. Security will escort you. Your final paychecks will be processed according to standard timeline, but there will be no severance. All of this is documented and legally sound." Jessica's professionalism cracked completely. "This is unfair. We followed management's instructions. We can't be held responsible for—" "You can be held responsible for your own actions. That's how accountability works." Ethan's voice remained level, but something in it made Jessica stop mid-sentence. "I'm not interested in hearing excuses about following orders or industry standards. I'm interested in the fact that you made a 7-year-old child feel unwelcome, that you looked at people and decided their worth based on their clothing, that you participated in a system designed to make certain guests invisible." Marcus finally found his voice. "What about references? Future employment? You're essentially ending our careers in hospitality. I'm ending your careers at my properties. What happens beyond that is up to you." Ethan met his eyes. "You want advice? Learn from this. Understand that every person you interact with deserves basic respect. Figure out why you thought it was acceptable to judge people based on appearances. And maybe, eventually, you'll find employers who value what you've learned. But it won't be here." The security team arrived with Miranda, who carried a small box of personal items and looked like she was moving through a nightmare. She wouldn't meet Ethan's eyes as they escorted her across the lobby and out the main doors. Jessica and Marcus followed 10 minutes later, similarly escorted, similarly carrying boxes. A few guests watched the procession with curiosity, but most were absorbed in their own vacations, unaware that the property's entire management structure had just been dismantled. When they were gone, Ethan stood in the lobby, feeling the weight of what he'd just done settle over him. The ocean beyond the windows continued its rhythm, indifferent to human drama. Guests moved through the space, checking in, checking out, living their lives. Richard called. "It's done. All 3 are off property. Interim team is landing at the airport in 40 minutes. They'll be operational by tonight." "Good. How are you doing?" "I'm fine." "Ethan, you just fired 3 people in the span of 30 minutes. It's okay not to be fine." "I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm disappointed that it came to this." Ethan moved toward the windows, looking out at the beach where he'd spent the morning with his son. "But I'm not conflicted. This needed to happen." "Agreed. For what it's worth, I think you handled it exactly right. Firm, fair, and thoroughly documented. They'd be foolish to challenge it legally. Send me the interim team's contact information. I want to brief them personally tonight." "Will do." "Ethan, one more thing. We're going to need to make some kind of statement to the remaining staff. They're going to have questions, concerns about job security, wondering if more terminations are coming. Schedule an all-staff meeting for tomorrow morning. I'll address everyone personally. You're staying for a few more days. I need to make sure the transition is solid and that we're actually implementing the changes we talk about." Ethan paused. "And I need to understand what else might be broken that I haven't seen yet." They talked logistics for another 20 minutes, coverage plans, operational continuity, communication strategies. By the time they hung up, Ethan felt the exhaustion of the morning catching up with him. He'd been running on adrenaline and conviction, but now that the immediate confrontations were over, the emotional cost was becoming apparent. He went up to room 412, stood on the balcony, and called his mother. "It's done," he said when she answered. "All of it?" 3 terminations, all for cause, all documented. Interim team arriving tonight. "How do you feel?" "Like I did what needed to be done. Like it wasn't enough. Like maybe I should have seen this earlier, prevented it from getting this bad." You can't prevent people from making bad choices, Ethan. You can only respond when those choices become clear. "I built this place, Mom. I hired Miranda. I created the system she corrupted." "You created a system based on good principles. She corrupted it. That's on her, not you." His mother's voice was gentle but firm. "Don't carry guilt for other people's failures. Learn from it, adjust your processes, but don't carry it." "How's he doing? My son?" "He's fine. Hasn't stopped talking about the beach. Showed me every shell at least 3 times. He's happy, Ethan. Today was exactly what you wanted it to be for him." "Good. That's what matters. But you matter too. Don't forget that while you're fixing everything else." After they hung up, Ethan showered, changed clothes, and headed back down to the lobby. The afternoon shift was in place, different faces, same uniforms. A young woman at the front desk smiled when she saw him approach. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" "I'm Ethan Brooks. I own the property. I'd like to introduce myself." Her eyes widened slightly, but her smile remained genuine. "Oh, Mr. Brooks, it's wonderful to meet you. I'm Sarah Chen. I've been here about 8 months. "How are you finding it? Working here, I mean." "Honestly, it's been complicated lately. The guests are wonderful, the property is beautiful, but the management philosophy has been kind of confusing. We're told to provide excellent service, but then we're also told to prioritize certain guests over others, and it's hard to reconcile those directives." "That's going to change, starting now." Ethan leaned against the desk, casual but present. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. No repercussions, no judgment, just truth." "Okay. Have you ever been instructed to treat guests differently based on their appearance or booking method?" Sarah hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Not explicitly instructed, no, but it's been made clear through example and correction. When I've spent time helping guests who were dressed casually or who seemed uncertain about the resort's amenities, I've been pulled aside and told I should be more efficient with my time, that I should focus on high-value interactions." "Who told you that?" "Usually Marcus or Jessica, occasionally Ms. Cole directly." "And how did that make you feel?" "Wrong." Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. "It felt wrong. I got into hospitality because I love helping people, making their vacation special, creating good memories. Being told to rank people based on what they're wearing or how much they're spending, it goes against everything I thought this industry was about." Ethan smiled, the first genuine one since the confrontations. "Sarah, how would you like to be part of rebuilding this property's culture?" "I'd love that, sir." "Good. There's going to be an all-staff meeting tomorrow morning. I'm going to need people who understand what real hospitality looks like to help lead the changes we're implementing. Are you interested?" "Absolutely." "Excellent. We'll talk more tomorrow." He straightened up. "One more thing. If you see any guest being treated with anything less than complete respect, I want you to address it immediately. And if you can't address it yourself, you call me directly." He pulled out a business card, wrote his cell number on the back. "Day or night, this property is going to live up to its values starting right now." Sarah took the card, her expression a mix of hope and determination. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks, really. Some of us have been waiting for this kind of change." Ethan spent the next 2 hours walking the property, introducing himself to staff, asking questions, listening to answers that ranged from cautiously optimistic to genuinely relieved. He met with the chef, the housekeeping supervisor, the activities coordinator, the maintenance manager. Every conversation revealed another layer of the system Miranda had built, the subtle and not-so-subtle ways staff had been taught to discriminate, the pressure to prioritize revenue over humanity, the slow erosion of values in favor of metrics. But every conversation also revealed people who'd been uncomfortable with those directives, people who'd quietly resisted when they could, who'd maintained their own standards of decency despite management pressure. who'd been hoping someone would notice and care. The interim management team arrived at 6, 3 experienced hospitality professionals Ethan had worked with before, people he trusted to implement change without creating chaos. He briefed them in the conference room, walking through everything that had happened, the terminations, the systematic issues, the immediate priorities. Your job isn't to burn everything down, he told them. It's to identify what's broken, fix what can be fixed, and build support among staff who want to do this right. We're not here to punish people. We're here to restore integrity to operations. They worked until after 10, developing plans for tomorrow's staff meeting, creating new training protocols, revising service standards to eliminate the tiered approach Miranda had implemented. By the time Ethan returned to room 412, he was exhausted in every possible way. He stood on the balcony one final time, looking out at the ocean in darkness. The waves kept their rhythm, patient and relentless, reshaping the shore whether anyone watched or not. His phone buzzed. A text from his son, dictated to his grandmother. "Dad, I miss you. Grandma says you're being brave. Love you." Ethan typed back. "Miss you too, buddy. Love you more than all the shells on that beach. Sleep tight." Then he sent a message to Richard. "First day of accountability complete. Tomorrow we start building something better." The response came quickly. "You did the right thing. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be intense." Ethan went inside, set his alarm, and fell into bed still fully dressed. Sleep came quickly, deep and dreamless. The sleep of someone who'd acted according to their values, regardless of cost. Outside, the ocean continued its work, wave after wave, each one carrying away what no longer served, each one building toward what came next. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more decisions, more opportunities to choose between comfortable convenience and difficult integrity. But tonight, 3 people who'd used power to diminish others were gone, and a property built on principles of dignity had taken its first real step toward living up to those principles. The tide had turned, and Ethan Brooks was no longer invisible. Morning arrived with the same pale light, the same waves, but everything else had changed. Ethan woke to his alarm feeling more rested than he'd felt in days, despite the weight of what lay ahead. He showered, dressed in clothes that were slightly more formal than his previous resort wear, still casual but unmistakably deliberate, and headed down to the conference room where the all-staff meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. The interim management team was already there, setting up chairs, testing the microphone, organizing handouts. The lead manager, Catherine Reyes, looked up when Ethan entered. "We're expecting about 45 staff members," she said. "Everyone who's not actively covering essential services. We've arranged coverage so people can attend in shifts if needed." "Good. How's the mood?" "Mixed. Some people are nervous about job security. Some are relieved about yesterday's changes. A few are angry that we terminated their managers without warning." Catherine handed him a folder. "We've prepared talking points, but honestly, this needs to come from you. They need to hear directly from the owner about what happened and why." Ethan took the folder but didn't open it. "I'm not using talking points. This needs to be real." Staff began filtering in around 7:45, taking seats with the cautious energy of people who weren't sure what to expect. Ethan recognized some faces from yesterday's conversations: Sarah from the front desk, Patricia from breakfast service, David from the restaurant. Others were strangers, people who worked night shifts or in back-of-house positions he hadn't encountered yet. By 8 o'clock, the room was full. 47 people, representing every department of the resort's operations. Some looked curious, some worried, some openly skeptical. Ethan stood at the front of the room and waited until the conversations died down and all eyes were on him. "Good morning. For those who don't know me, I'm Ethan Brooks. I founded this company 5 years ago, and I own this property along with 6 others across the country. Yesterday, I terminated 3 members of your management team: Miranda Cole, Jessica Winters, and Marcus Chen. I know that's created uncertainty and questions, and you deserve answers." He paused, letting the directness of his words settle. "I didn't fire them because of revenue numbers or operational efficiency. I fired them because they created and enforced a system that violated every principle this company was built on. They taught staff to treat guests differently based on appearance and perceived wealth. They buried complaints from guests who didn't meet their arbitrary standards of value. and they created an environment where discrimination was disguised as professional service. A hand went up in the back, a young man in a housekeeping uniform. Mr. Brooks, some of us were told that service calibration was industry standard, that prioritizing high-value guests was just good business practice. Were we wrong to follow those directives? That's a fair question, and the answer is complicated. Ethan moved away from the podium, making the conversation less formal. Yes, many luxury properties do tier their service, but there's a difference between offering premium amenities to guests who pay for them and treating other guests with contempt. There's a difference between efficiency and discrimination. The line Miranda crossed wasn't about business strategy, it was about basic human dignity. Another hand, this time from a woman Ethan didn't recognize. What happens to those of us who did what we were told? Are we going to be fired too? No. Unless you personally engaged in discriminatory behavior beyond what management instructed, your jobs are secure. But I need everyone in this room to understand something. Ethan looked around, making eye contact with as many people as possible. From today forward, we're operating differently. Every guest who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with respect. Not because of what they're wearing or how they booked their room, but because they're human beings who trusted us with their vacation, their celebration, their rest. That's not a suggestion. That's the baseline expectation for working here. David, the server from the restaurant, raised his hand. Mr. Brooks, I have to say, some of us have been doing that all along. We've been treating everyone well because it's the right thing to do, but we've also been criticized for it by management, told we were wasting time on low-value interactions. How do we trust that this change is real and not just temporary damage control? By holding me accountable, by speaking up when you see problems, by refusing to let this property slide back into the same patterns. Ethan pulled out his wallet and extracted a stack of business cards. I'm giving everyone my direct cell number. If you see discrimination happening, if you feel pressured to treat guests differently based on bias, if you experience anything that contradicts what I'm saying right now, call me, text me, email me. I don't care what time it is or how inconvenient it might be. I want to know. He handed the cards to Catherine, who began distributing them throughout the room. Sarah from the front desk stood up. Mr. Brooks, I have a question. How did this happen in the first place? How did Miranda build this system without you knowing about it? Because I wasn't paying attention. The admission came easier than Ethan expected. I trusted my managers to operate according to our values without verifying that they were actually doing so. I looked at revenue reports and satisfaction scores without digging into the details. I created the opportunity for this to happen by being absent. He met Sarah's eyes. That's on me, and it's going to change. I'll be spending more time at all our properties, not just reviewing numbers, but experiencing them as a guest would. Being present, paying attention. The skeptical faces in the room were starting to soften, replaced by something that looked like cautious hope. An older man in a maintenance uniform raised his hand. What about the guests who were treated badly? The ones who complained and got dismissed? Are we doing anything for them? Yes. We're reaching out to every guest who filed a complaint in the past year that was marked as unfounded. We're offering sincere apologies and inviting them back for complimentary stays. It won't undo what happened, but it acknowledges that we failed them and we're trying to do better. Catherine stepped forward. Mr. Brooks, if I may add something. At his nod, she addressed the room. We're also implementing new training protocols, not about service calibration or guest value assessment, but about recognizing and addressing bias, about understanding how our own assumptions can affect how we treat people, about creating genuinely inclusive environments. This training will be mandatory for all staff, including management, including Mr. Brooks. That got a few surprised looks and a couple of quiet laughs. She's right, Ethan confirmed. I'm not exempt from this work. None of us are. We all carry biases and assumptions. The difference is whether we're willing to examine them and change our behavior. The questions continued for another 40 minutes. Some were practical, about new management structure, reporting systems, operational changes. Others were more personal, about job security, about whether this was really sustainable, about how to handle guests who explicitly demanded preferential treatment based on their status. Ethan answered everything honestly, sometimes admitting he didn't have a complete solution yet, but committed to finding one. By the time the meeting ended, the energy in the room had shifted from anxious uncertainty to something resembling cautious optimism. As people filed out, several stopped to shake his hand or thank him for his directness. Patricia, the breakfast server, paused beside him. "Mr. Brooks, I've worked in hospitality for 32 years. I've seen a lot of properties, a lot of managers. What you did yesterday, standing up for your values even when it was easier to look away, that's rare. Thank you. Thank you for maintaining your own standards even when management was pushing you to compromise them." After everyone left, Ethan met with the interim team to review implementation plans. They worked through lunch, identifying policy changes, updating training materials, creating new feedback mechanisms that would make it harder for discriminatory practices to hide in operational metrics. Around 2 p.m., Catherine's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her expression grew concerned. "Mr. Brooks, there's someone in the lobby asking to speak with you. Says her name is Miranda Cole." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. Did she say what she wants? Just that she needs 5 minutes of your time. She says it's not about her termination. "I'll handle it." He stood, straightened his shirt, and headed to the lobby. Miranda stood near the windows, no longer wearing her manager's uniform, dressed in civilian clothes that made her look smaller somehow, less imposing. She turned when she heard him approaching, and he saw that her eyes were red-rimmed, her professional composure completely gone. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes." "I know, I needed to say something before I left town." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I was wrong. About everything. About how I ran this property, about how I treated guests, about what I taught my staff. I was so focused on numbers and efficiency and maintaining what I thought luxury meant that I forgot the actual purpose of what we do." Ethan waited, silent. "I spent all last night reading the employee handbook. The real one, not the version I'd rewritten in my head to justify my choices. And I realized that every principle I violated was right there in writing. You didn't hide your values. I just decided they were idealistic and impractical and that I knew better." Her voice cracked slightly. "And then you showed up, and you were exactly the kind of guest I'd trained my staff to dismiss. And I treated you and your son with contempt because you didn't fit my narrow definition of valuable." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I owe you an apology. A real one. Not because I think it'll change anything about my termination. I deserve that. But because you were right and I was wrong, and you deserve to hear me say it." Miranda's hands twisted together. "I made a 7-year-old child feel unwelcome. I can't stop thinking about that. About how he must have felt being stopped and questioned and judged, just for existing in a space his father paid for him to enjoy. That's not who I wanted to be when I got into this industry. That's not the person I thought I was. But it's who I became, and I'm ashamed of that." Ethan studied her face, seeing genuine remorse where yesterday there had been only defensive anger. "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know. Look for another job, probably not in hospitality. Do some serious thinking about my values and why I compromised them so easily." She met his eyes. "Learn from this. Make sure I never treat another human being the way I treated you and the others. That's all any of us can do. Recognize our failures and commit to doing better. For what it's worth, Mr. Brooks, what you built here, the principles, the mission, the vision, it's good. It's worth protecting. I'm sorry I corrupted it." She started to turn away, then paused. "One more thing. Jessica and Marcus, they were following my lead. They made their own choices, yes, but I created the environment that made those choices seem acceptable. If there's any grace to be extended, it should go to them, not me." "I'll keep that in mind." Miranda nodded and walked toward the exit. Ethan watched her go, feeling a complicated mix of satisfaction and sadness. Accountability was necessary, but it wasn't triumphant. It was just the clearing away of what didn't work to make room for what might. He spent the rest of the afternoon walking the property again, this time observing how staff interacted with guests without the pressure of Miranda's system. The differences were already visible: more genuine smiles, more relaxed engagement, less of the calculating assessment that had characterized every interaction before. At the pool, he saw Sarah helping an elderly couple navigate the towel service with patience and warmth. In the restaurant, David was making recommendations to a family dressed in beach clothes with the same enthusiasm he'd bring to guests in formal wear. Small moments of basic decency that shouldn't have been remarkable, but were, given the context. Around 5 p.m., his phone rang. His son. "Dad, guess what?" "What, buddy?" "Grandma says maybe we can go back to the beach next month. Can we? Can we go to the same place?" Ethan looked around the lobby, at the ocean beyond the windows, at the property that was slowly becoming what it was supposed to be. "Yeah, buddy, I think we can do that. But next time, it's going to be even better." "How can it be better? It was already perfect." "Trust me, it will be." After they hung up, Ethan found himself back on the balcony of room 412, the same spot where he'd spent so many hours over the past few days processing everything that had happened. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Catherine called to check in. "Day 1 of new operations complete. Staff seem energized. We had 3 guests specifically comment on improved service, which is interesting given that most of them have no idea anything changed. Good service is noticeable, even when people can't articulate why." "Agreed." "Ethan, I have to ask, are you really going to do this at all your properties? The direct cell number, the accessibility, the personal oversight?" "Yes." "That's not sustainable long term. You can't personally manage 6 properties." "I'm not managing them. I'm being present in them. There's a difference." Ethan watched waves catch the evening light. "I built these properties because I believe hospitality matters. That how we treat people during their moments of rest and celebration reflects something important about who we are. But I let that vision become abstract. I let metrics replace meaning. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Even if it costs you efficiency? Especially if it costs me efficiency. What's the point of running profitable properties that make people feel small?" Catherine was quiet for a moment. "You know what? I've worked with a lot of owners and CEOs. Most of them talk about values during crisis and forget them during daily operations. I think you might actually mean this." "I do." "Then I'm in. Whatever you need to make this work across all properties, I'm in." They talked strategy until the sun touched the horizon. Plans for auditing other properties, implementing similar accountability measures, creating systems that would surface problems before they became entrenched. It was ambitious, probably overwhelming, definitely more work than maintaining the status quo. But the status quo had allowed Miranda's system to flourish, and Ethan was done with that. He ordered room service for dinner. The same young server from his first night delivered it, the one who'd been genuinely kind when kindness wasn't the norm. "I heard what happened yesterday," the young man said while setting up the tray. "The staff changes. People are saying you fired the managers because they were treating guests badly." "That's accurate." "Good. I mean, I know that sounds harsh, but some of us have been uncomfortable for a while watching how things were done. It's nice to work somewhere that actually cares about doing right by people." He handed Ethan the receipt. "Thank you for that, Mr. Brooks." After he left, Ethan sat on the balcony with his dinner and watched the ocean fade into darkness. He thought about the past 3 days, the anger and frustration of being invisible, the confrontations, the terminations, the slow work of rebuilding what had been corrupted. He thought about his son, excitedly planning their return trip, unaware of everything that had transpired after he left. That innocence was worth protecting. That trust was worth honoring. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Proud of you. Your father would be too. Don't forget to take care of yourself while you're fixing everything else." He typed back, "I won't. Thank you for everything." Then came a message from Richard. "Preliminary audit results from our other properties are in. Want the good news or bad news first? Just tell me." "Good news? Nothing as systematic as what Miranda built. Bad news? We've got smaller issues at 3 properties that need addressing. Similar patterns of selective service, just not as developed." "Send me the details. I'll visit each property personally next month." "Figured you'd say that. Already started scheduling." Ethan smiled. Richard knew him well enough to anticipate that visible problems wouldn't be ignored just because they were smaller. If anything, knowing they existed before they grew into Miranda-sized disasters made intervention more urgent. Over the next 2 days, Ethan stayed at the resort, observing, adjusting, supporting the interim team as they implemented changes. He checked in with staff members individually, asking about their experiences, listening to suggestions, making it clear that feedback was welcome and valued. He also personally called 12 former guests who'd filed complaints that had been dismissed. The conversations were difficult: apologies for failures, acknowledgments of harm done, invitations to return on the company's dime. Some people were gracious, some were still angry. One woman actually cried when he told her that her complaint had been valid and that the staff members responsible no longer worked there. "You have no idea what it feels like," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "to be treated like you're invisible. Like you don't matter. Like your money is good enough, but you aren't." "I do know, actually. That's why I'm calling." On his final morning at the resort, Ethan walked the beach one last time. The sand was cool under his feet, the morning still quiet before guests emerged for the day. He found the spot where he and his son had built their castle. It was gone now, erased by tides, but the memory remained clear. Sarah found him there around 8 a.m. "Mr. Brooks? I thought you should know. We just had a family check-in. They booked through a discount site, they're dressed casually, and they have 3 kids who are already excited and loud in the lobby. And Marcus would have made them wait 3 hours and invented policy violations. Jessica would have looked right through them." Sarah smiled. But Emily at the front desk greeted them warmly, got them checked in immediately, and is currently arranging for beach toys to be sent to their room as a welcome amenity. "I thought you'd want to know that your changes are actually working. Thank you for telling me. And thank you for being part of making it work." Before he left, Ethan stood in the lobby one final time, watching the morning flow of guests and staff. The marble was still pristine, the chandeliers still sparkled, the ocean still stretched endlessly beyond the windows. But something fundamental had shifted. The cold efficiency had been replaced by something warmer, more human, more aligned with the vision he'd carried when he first broke ground on this property. Catherine walked him to his car. "We'll keep you updated on progress. Weekly reports, incident logs, satisfaction metrics. I know you will, but I'll also be back next month with my son. Unannounced, probably in my worst beach clothes, just to see how it really feels." She laughed. "I'd expect nothing less." The drive back to the airport gave Ethan time to process everything that had happened. 5 days ago, he'd arrived seeking rest and found discrimination. He'd been invisible, dismissed, made to feel unwelcome in a place he'd built. His son had been made to feel the same way. But that invisibility had given him something valuable: clarity about what existed beneath the polished surface, truth about how principles played out in practice, knowledge about where his systems had failed. And now, 3 people who'd corrupted those systems were gone. New leadership was in place. Staff were empowered to do what they'd known was right all along. And dozens of small moments of genuine hospitality were happening across the property, rebuilding its culture one interaction at a time. On the plane home, Ethan pulled out his laptop and began drafting a company-wide memo. It outlined what had happened at Seascape, why it had happened, and what would be changing across all properties. He didn't soften the language or hide behind corporate speak. He named the failures directly and committed to specific changes. The final paragraph read, "We built this company on the principle that hospitality means seeing the humanity in every guest. That principle isn't negotiable. It isn't subject to efficiency calculations or revenue optimization. It's the foundation of everything we do. If we can't honor that principle, we shouldn't be in this business. Moving forward, we're going to verify that our operations match our values. And where they don't, we're going to fix them, regardless of the cost." He sent the memo to all property managers and department heads with a note. "Read this carefully. If you have concerns about meeting these standards, let's talk now. If you can't commit to these principles, I need to know that too." By the time he landed, 3 managers had already responded with enthusiastic support. One had resigned, acknowledging that her operational philosophy didn't align with the direction outlined in the memo. Ethan appreciated her honesty and accepted the resignation without argument. His son was waiting when he got home, bursting with questions about the resort and updates about school, and demands to know when they could go back to the beach. Ethan scooped him up, this kid who was getting too big to scoop, but still let his father do it anyway, and held him tight. "Love you, buddy." "Love you too, Dad. Are you done being brave now?" "Not quite, but I'm done with the hard part." That night, after his son was asleep, Ethan sat on his own balcony, smaller than the resort's, overlooking a suburban street instead of an ocean, and thought about what he'd learned. He'd learned that good intentions meant nothing without active verification, that values had to be practiced, not just stated, that power corrupted easily when nobody was watching, that accountability was uncomfortable but essential, that dignity should never be negotiable. Most importantly, he'd learned that being invisible sometimes revealed more truth than being recognized ever could. His phone buzzed one final time. A text from Sarah. "Just wanted to let you know, the family I mentioned this morning, they just left the breakfast room. Their kids were loud and messy and wonderful, and Patricia treated them like royalty. One of the parents stopped at the front desk to say this was the most welcoming resort they'd ever visited. Thought you should know." Ethan typed back, "Thank you for telling me. That's exactly what we're building." He looked up at the stars, different stars than the ones visible from the resort, but connected to the same sky, and felt something settle in his chest. Not satisfaction exactly, but the quiet certainty that comes from acting according to your principles, regardless of cost. Tomorrow he'd start reviewing reports from other properties. Next week he'd visit the locations Richard had flagged. Next month he'd return to Seascape with his son, unannounced, to verify that changes had stuck. But tonight he could rest knowing that somewhere on the Atlantic coast, a family was sleeping in a resort that finally lived up to its stated values. That staff members were being empowered to show basic kindness without fear of management reprisal. That the next guest who walked through those doors in worn clothes and tired eyes would be greeted with dignity instead of dismissal. It wasn't perfect. There would be setbacks, challenges, moments when the old habits tried to resurface. But the foundation had shifted. The accountability had been established. The line had been drawn between acceptable and unacceptable behavior, and everyone knew which side they needed to be on. Ethan pulled out the conch shell his son had found on the beach, the one he'd carried home as a souvenir. He turned it in his hands, feeling its smooth curves, its weight, its quiet testimony to time spent in the ocean being shaped by waves. That's what he was doing, really, reshaping his company's culture one wave at a time, patient and relentless, and absolutely certain that change was possible when you committed to it fully. His son appeared in the doorway, sleepy-eyed and clutching his stuffed dolphin. "Dad, why are you still awake?" "Just thinking, buddy. Come here." His son climbed into his lap, too big for it really, but they made it work. They sat together in the darkness, looking at stars, the conch shell resting between them. "Dad, when we go back to the beach, will it still be the same?" "It'll be better." "Promise?" "Promise." His son accepted this with the complete trust of childhood and dozed off against his father's chest. Ethan held him, feeling the weight and warmth of this small person who'd inadvertently sparked everything that followed and made one final promise, not spoken aloud, just held in his heart. He promised to never let comfort override conscience, to never let efficiency trump dignity, to never let the pursuit of profit blind him to the human cost of his decisions. He promised to stay visible, stay engaged, stay accountable. He promised to build something worth his son's trust and his father's pride. And somewhere on the Atlantic coast, waves continued their patient work, reshaping the shore outside a resort where dignity was no longer negotiable, where respect was given freely, where every guest, regardless of appearance or booking method or perceived worth, was finally, truly welcome. The slap that had shattered everything had also cleared the way for something better. And that, Ethan thought, carrying his sleeping son to bed, was exactly how accountability was supposed to work. Not as punishment, but as correction. Not as vengeance, but as restoration. Not as an ending, but as a beginning. The story was complete, the lesson learned, the changes made. And the ocean kept its rhythm, indifferent and eternal, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring.